Just a few months ago, I said I was not going to be picking up this kit. What changed my mind? Well, stick around and you'll find out. Hello and welcome to Channel 2S. I'm your host, Second Soundwave, and in front of us today we have the Masquerade GM Sniper 2. This Masquerade model kit came out in January 2017 at a retail price of 3,800 yen, and despite my initial reservations, I found myself holding a surprisingly positive opinion of this kit. Now, a big part of what finally pushed me over the edge to pick up this kit was the many awesome customs I saw of this guy all over the internet. I saw this thing painted and panel lined and all done up, and it looked fantastic. But after building this kit for myself, I discovered that even a straight build can leave you with a really impressive top-of-the-line Masquerade experience. As this is a modern Masquerade release, it packs in a ton of great looking details. The clear green optics on this kit look super nice, and the silver foil stickers underneath them make them look like they're practically glowing when you shine a light on them. The rest of the head is also molded in multiple colors of plastic, leaving it with a level of detail that puts the high grade to shame. The torso also looks great from the front, and the backpack is rendered perfectly, complete with red inserts on the thrusters. However, the arms are where my problems initially began with this kit. While the shoulders do look nice with 3 separate colors of plastic, the shoulder pads in the Masquerade are noticeably taller, and they also sit pretty high on his arms, which makes him constantly look like he's shrugging. This is especially noticeable when you compare this model to the high grade. Initially, this change in proportions, along with a couple other minor quirks, was enough to turn me off of buying this model. However, it is a very good thing that I ultimately changed my mind, because I also found a way to fix this problem. More on that later. Now, back on the subject of detailing, there is one other thing on the arms I think they could have handled a little bit better, and that is the elbow pads. There's very obviously supposed to be these little round cutaways, 5 of them, on the elbow pad, and you really should be able to see frame through there, but they didn't mold it that way. The whole thing's just one solid piece of blue plastic. And on a modern Masquerade release like this, a gray frame section underneath a part like this really isn't that much to ask. This problem rises up again in the legs, where all they would have had to do was just leave these parts open since there's already gray frame underneath. However, they did not, and while it's not too distracting with how detailed and complete the rest of the model looks, it is a little bit off-putting. Also off-putting initially were the proportions in the legs, because they're a lot thicker than they're supposed to be. This is a result of the Masquerade GM Sniper 2 reusing a lot of leg frame from the Masquerade RX-78-2 version 2.0. And the RX-78 does have somewhat thicker legs than the GM Sniper 2, so naturally if they're going to use the frame from that model, of course they are going to have to make the armor wider to fit around it, and of course that's going to affect the proportions of the model. Now, while this did initially turn me off from getting this kit, as it was just enough to make it not quite feel like the GM Sniper to me, I eventually got used to it over the course of the build, and it really doesn't bother me anymore. And they also made some more changes on the back of the legs, where the thruster covers are given a bit more of a hexagonal look as opposed to the completely straight thruster guards on the high grade. And of course they added more of those awesome red inserts to the thrusters, which makes them look that much cooler. So while I do have a few issues here and there with the design of the GM Sniper 2, I'd say overall the general appearance of this kit is pretty fantastic. And whether you're looking at it from the front or behind, it is a fantastic looking model that will be right at home with your Federation Masquerade collection. So now it's time to move on to the articulation, and this is where things get crazy. Remember that absolutely insane level of articulation that the high-grade GM ground type had? Well, imagine that level of care and effort put into something almost twice the size. That's basically the GM Sniper 2. So there's a ton of articulation on this model, and right off the bat, I'm going to start up here with the stuff on the head. So the visor can move up and down, and you're supposed to put a little sticker over here, but I didn't because, come on, it's a translucent green piece. It doesn't need a foil sticker. The head is on a ball joint that allows it to look up to here and down to here. And then the entire neck section can hinge forward, allowing him to look down even further. And if you're careful, you can get him to do a full 360. Now the shoulders are where this gets really interesting. So remember how I said that the shoulders looked like they were really high up in his body and it kind of made him look like he was always shrugging? Well, that's actually because there is this double hinge mechanism inside of the shoulder pad that it connects them to the arm, and because of the extra mass of this hinge in here, the shoulder pad actually sits much higher up on the arm than you would expect. As you can see here, when you look at the shoulder joint just on its own, it's actually mounted pretty low on his torso. It's just that once you put the shoulder pad over it, of course, then it looks like it's too high. And this double hinge mechanism is here for a reason, since that plus this little flap here does allow you to get a lot of upwards shoulder movement out of this model, and once you have his arm up, you can basically use those hinges to get the shoulder however you want. As you can see, with a few seconds of fiddling, I was able to get his arm up even higher than I had it before. And that's all thanks to this insane tangle of joints he has inside his shoulder. So there's one joint that lets you move the arm up and down, and then behind that there's another joint that allows you to get the arm ridiculously far forward. And I mean ridiculous, just look at that range. That is incredible. And to make it even cooler, there's this little hydraulic that pops out of his chest as you're rotating the arm out. Of course, he's also got the usual rotation. And did I mention there was a way to fix the tall shoulders? Because there totally is. And it's literally just as simple as doing this. Because thanks to all those joints inside the torso, you can actually slide his arms up and down on his body. And when you slide them down, his shoulder pads line up with his chest, and his shoulders no longer look too tall. It's an incredibly simple change to the figure's silhouette, but it's one that, for me at least, makes all the difference. Now further down the arm, we have all the usuals like bicep rotation and a double jointed elbow. And here's a few more shots of that elbow in action so you can see the awesome hydraulics and other details molded inside of it. You can see there's a set of hydraulics in the lower arm and another set in the upper arm. And if you want to make these stand out even more, a silver Gundam marker would work wonders for this. Now coming out of the wrist, there's actually a lot more going on down here than I'm used to. At the wrist, there are actually two different joints, one at the hand and one lower inside of the arm, and there's a little ring around them that hides the joint, and you can get a lot of mobility out of these. And then there's a hinge right there, so you can pop his fingers off. I'll get to that later. But you can bend his wrist really far in. You can bend his wrist really far out, and basically do whatever you want with them so long as the fingers don't fall off. And as you just saw, this guy's hands are the wing style / seed style swappable finger hands. More specifically, these are the ones that came with the Masquerade Age 1 normal. And a big problem that a lot of people have had with this kit was loose fingers. Now after carefully studying the model, I discovered that this was actually not an inherent problem with the kit. Instead, it's a problem with the way most people probably try to build the kit. The bulk of the hand build is made up of two pieces. There's a blue piece on the back and a gray piece on the front. These two pieces have to be tabbed together very, very tightly. However, in the process of pushing these pieces together very, very tightly, it is very easy, if you're not careful, to bend this little flap backwards. And when you bend that flap backwards, it stretches out that hole that the fingers are supposed to slot into, so they no longer fit into the hand as tightly as they were originally intended. So after discovering this with the left hand of the model, I was a lot more careful when I was assembling the right side. I took my time. I was a lot more even with the pressure that I put on these pieces to push them together, and I made sure not to push from this outer flap. And sure enough, the fingers do connect much more securely on the right hand of my model. Granted, they can still be popped in and out fairly easily, but they are not nearly as loose as they are on the other side. And this is a problem that a lot of people have had with this model, so if you haven't built your GM Sniper 2 yet, heed my advice and be very careful when you're assembling the hands. Now moving down to the torso, this figure does have a completely, and I mean completely unrestricted, 180 degree, 360 degree, whatever you want to call it, torso rotation. He has a great sideways torso bend, a great forwards torso bend, and a great backwards torso bend. There's basically nothing this guy's body can't do. And furthermore, if you want to see the faceless grunt that pilots this thing, all you have to do is lift up this little flap and... yeah, okay, so when you open the cockpit door, unfortunately because of where the cockpit's placed inside of the kit, all you can see is his feet and his shins. That's all you're seeing. But hey, at least it makes the pilot figure easier to paint, right? And since I guess I forgot to talk about it before when I was talking about the fingers, the thumb on this kit is on a ball joint, and then there is a hinge right here. You have to be careful with the thumb though, because this front section can pop off really easily if you're not careful. Moving back down to the waist, the front skirts are on this kind of double hinge mechanism. So you can get them totally out of the way, and they do have some awesome framework underneath them. Similar deal on the side skirts, they come up and out of the way, all the way, no problem whatsoever, all day, every day. However, in an odd move, there is actually no articulation to the back skirt whatsoever. This is something I've never seen before in a Masquerade, and it's kind of surprising considering that they basically went to the extreme in every other point of articulation. But while the kit won't be able to get any back kicks in, he does have a lot of sideways movement and a lot of forwards movement. And because of the way the skirt arm is attached, you can also rotate it up and out of the side, or you could also swing it outwards and around to the side slightly. The side skirts can also rotate up if you want to do that for some reason. And at the thigh there is a swivel, but it only goes a certain amount. Once you get to 180 degrees, it will not go farther. And what this means is that you cannot rotate this figure's legs inwards. You can have him standing like that, but if you wanted for some reason to have him standing with his toes facing inwards, this is about as far as you're going to get. The knee has a massively awesome 180 degree bend. It gets all the way up there, and if you look down in there, you can see pistons everywhere, because this is a master grade, and master grades are all about that frame. And below all that, we have the feet, which are crazy awesome. They have some great downwards movement. They've got some great upwards movement. They have a heel bend for people who want that. They have a toe bend. And of course this ankle guard can be moved up and down to hide the pistons if you want to do that. And on top of that, he also does have a pretty decent amount of sideways ankle tilt. And almost forgotten by me are the articulation points on the back. You got these little beam saber connectors right here that can move up and down independently. You can move them away from his body, or you can push them down flat against his back skirt. And if you move a little higher up his back, you can see the thruster pods on his flight pack are adjustable, so you can have them facing out, or you could have them facing down. It's up to you. Holy crap, that was a lot of articulation to get through, but as you saw, there is very little restricting you from getting this guy into whatever pose you want. So naturally, I chose to make the most awkward, derpy, uncomfortable looking pose I possibly could. So moving on to accessories, we're going to start with a set of accessories that I guess could be also kind of counter as articulation, since they do change the position of parts on the mobile suit. And that is this little pile of alternate fingers. So for hands, this guy has the closed fists you've seen him use throughout this video. He's got outspread hands for more relaxed poses. He's got hands for grabbing beam sabers and other smooth-handled objects. And he's got a right side trigger finger hand for holding both of his guns. There are also a pair of much tighter trigger finger hands, but these are actually a leftover from the Age 1, and you're actually not supposed to use them with any of the accessories that come with this model. So the first of this guy's major weapons that we're going to look at is his shield. So the shield here is very cool. It has that nice little bit of color separation there at the top. I'm a really big fan of that. And then when you come around to the underside, there is all sorts of mechanical stuff going on here. You got these ammo packs for the submachine gun that can be removed with a little bit of effort. You can just pop them right off like that and pop them into your gun. Once you have them off, you can actually grab onto this little section right here and lift it up. And that will allow you to stand the shield up so the GM Sniper 2 can use it as a bit of impromptu cover. There are also two different points where the GM Sniper 2 can hold onto this shield. There is a rotating handle right here, and then a rotating little connector clip here that just basically plugs into the back of his arm. You can plug it onto either side of his body. Usually I keep it to the left, but you plug this in, you can clip his hand around here, and he holds onto the shield very securely. And while I feel the shield might be sitting a little low on his arm, for the most part it looks pretty awesome. And I'm just going to blast through the rest of this video since this is taking a lot longer than I thought it would. So the GM Sniper 2 has a submachine gun that looks very cool, and it fits into his hand just like so, and you can also pull out the ammo clips and replace them with either of the ones that you had on the inside of the shield. So you can just pull this out like that, it comes out, you can stick it back in, it kind of goes in an angle, just like that. But in the end, it's pretty much just the standard basic Federation sidearm, really nothing to write home about. What is worth talking about is this guy's freaking huge sniper rifle. Since this is the GM Sniper 2, of course this rifle is going to be the star of the show, and they went all out with this. It's molded in two different colors. And while it does have a pretty ugly seam line going down the back, the handle in general, it just plain looks great. And because of how light this rifle is, the GM Sniper can actually hold onto it with one hand if you want to. But of course, if you use a second hand to support the rifle, it is going to look a lot more realistic. And as my quick and lazy sniper pose demonstrates, this guy has absolutely no problem dropping down to one knee if that's what you want to do with him. And if you want him lying on his stomach, he can do that reasonably well, I guess. Even with all that movement in his torso, it's still quite a challenge. And finally, there's a pair of beam sabers stored on this guy's back. And of course those can be held in his hands, and you get a pair of very nice looking pink beam saber effect parts to go with them. But really, who would display a GM Sniper 2 with the beam sabers? That's just silly. This guy's beam sabers actually have one final trick they can perform, because you can take the whole section that they're mounted to, and if you wiggle at it a little bit, you can actually remove it entirely from his back skirt. And then if you look at this connector right here, you'll notice that it's shaped awfully similar to that one on his back, and sure enough, you can plug this in right here. And then boom! Looks great, but I still prefer them on his back. And also you get one of those little Masquerade stand connector thingies. You know how these work. You grab the figure, you stick this up his butt, and then you stick him on a stand, and he looks like he's flying. So in the end, do I recommend the Masquerade GM Sniper 2? The answer is yes. If you're careful building the hands and you're okay with the slightly modified proportions, I say it is a great model. There's a lot of really fun stuff to work with here. The sculpt is great, the articulation is fantastic, and this guy's weapons look so freaking awesome. And this is really not that big or expensive of a Masquerade, so I strongly recommend that you just get one and try it for yourself. This kit surprised me. Maybe it'll surprise you too. And that is exactly where this romp in Sniper Town comes to an end. As always, leave a like if you enjoyed this video. And if you got a friend who's on the fence about the Masquerade GM Sniper 2 or just isn't familiar with how freaking awesome this kit is, be sure to share this video with them and spread the awesome. And if this is your first time here on Channel 2S, I make all sorts of Gunpla related videos, from news to reviews to build logs to unboxings and everything in between. So if that sounds cool to you, be sure that you hit the subscribe button right about now. And don't forget to hit that notification bell, because I also live stream sometimes and you don't want to miss that. And as always, I'm your host, Second Soundwave, and I'll see you next time.